the biggest music show online, Sunday Scoops, where we dive into the history of Jamaican music. We focus on those who helped to shape the music, who shaped the industry. That is why this is the show. If you're interested in Jamaican music, Sunday Scoops, don't miss this. Today, Garth, who we feature?
One of the biggest, baddest roots, Rasta, reggae artists on the planet, still alive and kicking, distinguished, burning spear.
I introduce the man by the name that his mother searched for, put on
the government name.
The government name, Winston Rodney.
Yo. You know which other man have a big name like him? Rodney Price.
You already know which man have a big name like him, who no longer with us, was the great Walter Rodney.
Yep.
And when Winston Rodney was finding his footing in the music, it would have been in the second half of the 1960s. In 1968, Jamaica was under pressure. If I remember correctly, the Jamaica Labour Party was running their second term after being the government after independence. And consistent with what was going on in the world with all of this kind of social repression and so on. In fact, Walter Rodney had been lecturing at the University of the West Indies, and he had a very strong socialist leaning, went to Canada on a scholarship to attend a conference actually, and on his return to Jamaica was barred from landing at the Norman Manley International Airport. Declared. There you go. And the university, students at the University of the West Indies rioted, right? In fact, at the time, the riot ended up costing Jamaica some 12 million pounds. Rodney, so Burning Spear, you know, at this time a big follower of Marcus Garvey, which most of all of this thing, because listen, the background is important. Burning Spear was or Winston Rodney at the time, is a Garveyite. And so he looked at this thing, one of the most devout Rastaman to come out of Jamaican music.
Born in sentence being sentenced in March 1, 1945, which is right at the end of the Second World War.
There you go. And so he connected, he expressed an interest in singing, connected with Bob Marley at the time, who said to him, listen, you need to come to Kingston and come talk to Coxson's down at Studio One. And which he did. He came into Kingston with the intent of pursuing a musical career. And he did one of the Sunday audition at Studio One that was presided over...
Big mango tree.
Under the mango tree, presided over by Leroy Sibbles, who was the head of artists, recruitment and development.
Also a good bass player too.
And the first tune that he auditioned with was a tune called Door Peep. And he came in with Rupert Willington, and as a duo, they basically call themselves the Burning Spear, right? But let's give a listen to Door Peep.
I, son of the Most High, Jah Rastafari, our heart shall correspond and beat it in one harmony. Sounds from the burning spear.
Fire down below.
Door Peep.
Some like a nursery rhymes.
Listen.
A little teapot shot and so.
We look back on, them tune. Them tune represent.
1972, 1969.
Yeah, he just starting out. In fact,
but you can hear the chant. You can hear the Rasta influence. And, we keep referring to that particular moment when the music really, really changed. And that was when Prince Buster brought in Count Azzy.
And the mystic revelation
of
Rastafari and Abingi drummers.
And
right.
that opened the door for Rastafarianism in Jamaican music, and we have never looked back.
And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to lay that context, when we talk about the social, because Burning Spear, in fact, when he did the single, Door Peep, which was the initial tune, it was a duo with himself and Rupert Willington. They basically named themselves the Burning Spear, which was taking the name of the military award given to the Kenyan Prime Minister, Jomo Kenyatta. Right? And if you remember too, Jomo Kenyatta had survived a big trial over his role in the Mama Rebellion. Then he was defended by Dudley Thompson at the time, who came back in the early 60s, ran against Yaawd and lose. But this is a very critical time in Jamaica in terms of its social and political development, because the JLP administration at the time basically used Rasta as a beating stick. There was the big Rasta riots in Montego Bay in the early 1960s, and they followed that into the latter part. This whole
Gardens.
The Coral Gardens incident was in the mid to early 60s, but in 68 with the Rodney riots again, Rasta was the target, and so the idea was to put Rasta under pressure, and Burning Spear took the position.
And that also created the whole, Rastafarians had, in a sense, segregated themselves from traditional religion, but now, with all of these things, just basically make you realize that Rastaman is just total anti-establishmentarianism.
Well,
them not into
Rasta
establishment at all.
what Rasta was about is a kind of levity that run contrary to the Babylon levity. But cut a long story short, this is the basis on which Rodney is establishing himself. By the time Dodd signed them up at Studio One, he would have brought in Justin Hines' nephew, Delroy Hines. And so they made the thing a trio now, and they move up. Now, they spent about 5-6 years at Studio One, and in the 6-year association, out of that, they put out 2 albums, a number of singles, some the early work, which we're gonna touch on a couple of those.
The Door Peep, Fire Down Below.
Don't Mess with Jill. He Prayed, which we and I talk about that song with about Joe Fraser.
Yeah.
Down by the Riverside, Creation Rebel. Let's touch some of them songs and then we come back in. Because by 1972, the reggae era had now taken off, would have been almost 5 years old. Reggae started about 67. And what Coxsone was doing was putting himself in a position where he was attracting a lot more artists. He had basically set up Studio One as a major enterprise with artists and recruitment. Him had
musicians.
Him had one of the biggest parcel of musicians. Him had people like well, in terms of his own singers, right? A stable of the best singing talent out of Jamaica, but him had people like Jackie Me Too, because by now they would have bought that Hammond organ.
Right.
He would have installed some additional equipment which basically changed the sound of the music. And so Burning Spear got license, if you will, to bring what you call more horns into the music. Because I remember when the reggae music started to take off, eventually the wind instrument players came out of the thing. Right. Burning Spear brought them back, and this would become a feature of Burning Spear's career throughout, where he always operated with a huge orchestra, if you will.
Yeah, man.
Right? But he spent almost 6 years with Coxsone, and the all too familiar lament of musicians was them don't make any money.
And the man said, no money, no love.
And so, by the middle of the 70s, late 74, 75, Burning Spear, basically, the group almost they disintegrated. And Rodney went back to the hills of St. Ann and back into farming. Now, while there, he came across Lindo, the great Jack Ruby. Yeah, God rest him soul.
We have to go sound system. Boy,
we're gonna touch that. But Jack Ruby knew the work that Spear had been doing in Kingston with Studio One. And so he inveigled, we use a Jamaica term, he inveigled him to come out because now Jack Ruby sound a big sound on the North Coast. And he did the Marcus Garvey tune, which we started with. He basically did it with him as a special. When you imagine mid-1970s and a big set have a special from an artist like a Spear. And of course, the North Coast crowd couldn't get enough. And so Lindo pressured Spear to come back in the studio. And he did a number of tracks for the Jack Ruby high power sound, but eventually those songs hit the road. Slavery Days, Wadada, which is my personal anthem from the archives.
Red, Green and Gold.
There you go.
Jordan River.
We're going to feature some of those tunes, and we're going to use those tunes to show that step process that the great Burning Spear made to cement himself into the archives, or the annals, if you will, of Jamaica's reggae music. Mr. Selector.
Kicking off with Marcus Garvey.
Music set, because we talk about Rasta coming into the picture. Going back to St. Ann after the not so good experience with Coxsone, basically made Burning Spear took an entirely different approach with his music. So now he had the opportunity to exercise. Well, he might have more to
write some good songs.
But not only that, he had more of an opportunity now to take control of the creative content that he was putting out. The other thing too is because Coxsone had sat down, and remember when he went to Studio One in that 1969-70 period, he went there and he came into contact with people like the Abyssinians, who, if you remember, Abyssinians was one of the early Rasta group. Well, not all of them were Rasta anyway. But the point is, Coxsone recorded them Sata Masagana, which was a big tune, and never released it because he was a little dubious about the Rasta sound. He was still open to putting some of the material out, which is how come a couple of Burning Spear albums got out, but there were a lot more material that was sitting down in Studio One archives. Right. And so Spear decided that, something, that music is still his music. And so he re-recorded a lot of this music with Jack Ruby. And out of it, the album Marcus Garvey was produced, and then he did a dub album, which took Europe by storm, especially.
That dub album was basically the same album, but the dub of all the songs.
All the songs.
And then the thing is what they did, they called it the Ghost of Marcus
Garvey. Marcus Garvey.
But they renamed each song.
Right.
So they gave each song a different name, called it Garvey's Ghost actually. So, Slavery Days was named I and I Survive. Black Wadada, Invasion. Give Me was
we should get
food.
a listener a little taste
of those songs
of those. Not a big thing. Just a little sip. You show you again, and this is the creativity of the man, because he now have the opportunity to be around a sound system that is picking up a major influence within that sphere on the island north coast. Jack Ruby was a champion sound. Plus, Jack Ruby himself found a formula in terms of producing music that attracted a lot of people towards him. In fact, people like Big Youth joined him.
Big Youth even had a B-side to Marcus Garvey.
Marcus Garvey, there we go.
But
So
let's give a little taste. To Invasion, dub side, and you'll see the genius of Jack Ruby and Burning Spear at work.
in fact, to just to bring home that point, what happened is that they signed with Blackwell on the Garvey album, and Ireland apparently interfered with the tracks.
License.
You know, they basically decided to remix the track, speed up some of the music, because as you pointed out in our earlier off-stage conversation we talked about, the reggae's beat, the what you call it?
Between 50 to 80 BPM, which is about
the heartbeat,
the average human heart rate.
right?
Yeah,
And so
between 55 and 80 BPM.
when they did that with this particular album, it made Burning Spear particularly annoyed, right? And he basically threatened to walk away from Ireland, and as a consequence, he set up his own label. The label was called Burning Music, and what he then did is use that as a vehicle for releasing the future works. Still worked with Island Records, but the creative component of his work, he now took full control. And that's what you are getting when you talk about the same Garvey's Ghost album. They did another album called Man from the Hills. And you had songs from that, the title song, Man from the Hills, People Get Ready, It Is Good, Mother, and a whole host of other songs. So we're gonna give a little touch of that. But Burning Spear is now coming into his own. In fact, by this time, there are fissures within the group, and but Burning Spear was kind of steadfast in terms of the direction he wanted to go with his music. And so, let's get a taste of some of the work that he would have put into that third album, which was called Man from the Hills. And Garth, still have a few more tunes that we want you to touch from some of that earlier work. Over to you, boss.
Sounds of the Dry and Heavy album. Played two songs before. The song before this was I Win, The Sun, and of course, Big Bad, Throw Down Your Arms and Come.
Let me tell you.
Before you make a comment, Richie, you know me always love cut you off and thing. Sinead O'Connor, Irish singer.
At least I'm honest.
Did a tribute, what she said was a drum and bass tribute of how influenced she was by Jamaican music. And Throw Down Your Arms was one of them. Bad piece of tune.
Sinead O'Connor, as an Irish woman, there was, how would I put it? Similarities in terms of their experience of country under pressure, and the factor of her elevation in music spoke to that, and the music that she put out. But to Burning Spear, in 1976, Rodney decided that he wanted to go in a different direction, and the group basically split up. Willington and Hines basically went in their own direction, and on top of that, Ruby, Jack Ruby and them, he parted company with Jack Ruby, and they decided to use the name Burning Spear because he was the one who created the name anyway. Yes. And so he decided to use the name Burning Spear for himself and went out there as a solo act. So, but by this time too, the Burning Spear ensemble, if you want to call it, because that's what it became, a huge band of musicians backing this phenomenal mystic chanter, I call him, because they're not singing, certainly not DJing, but there's a kind of a haunting that comes once he gets behind a microphone that is just phenomenal. Throw down your arms and come. One of the most potent tunes to come out of Jamaica during that time. Burning Spear is literally appealing to the uprising that was coming out, demonstrating itself, showing its face in Jamaica,
right.
That 1976-77 period. And in the album itself, Dry and Heavy, for me, that is my signature Burning Spear album. In my opinion, every tune on that album was a shot.
But
and
as
this was him.
Every tune on the album, Richie, it brings us back to how we listened to music in the 70s and 80s. We listened to the whole album from start to finish.
And what is worse, what you know when you know a good artist is when they put together an album designed to please the listeners. Because
and albums weren't then created overnight.
No, this was a body of work.
You take a hiatus and nobody don't hear from you for about a year and a half. And then you drop an album and everybody's run to get that album.
This album had all of those ingredients. You're gonna play some more of the album for the listeners. But again, this is Burning Spear now in Izaki, because by this time, still doing some work with Island Records, but the album and Burning Spear himself had developed a sizable overseas following, particularly in the United Kingdom, that everywhere you go now, when you talk about roots music, when you talk about roots reggae, one name, Burning Spear. But Bob Marley was out there, people need to remember that, because this is 1976, 77.
Yep.
But Burning Spear was holding his own. Marley was a different kind of sound. Jimmy Cliff was out there too. Culture was out there as well.
The Palestinians were out there.
But the man who was the man of the moment, the group of the moment, Burning Spear. Let's give a listen to some more tracks off the album. Dry and Heavy was released in 77, and a masterful album. Almost, in my opinion, every track on this album was, to use a Jamaican term, murderer. And as we mentioned earlier, sometimes you buy an album and two tune and the album good. Burning Spear don't do that. This is a man who spend the time. He carve out his music, create a collection of songs that appeal to your listening pleasure. I mean, here we are, 44 years after, and the album's still fresh, yes, right? Yes, the messaging is very much there. Now, by this time, he is touring. And in the UK, he had developed a massive following. He had a big concert at the Rainbow Theatre in London in 1978, where he was backed by Yaawd. And if anybody know anything about reggae music, Yaawd was the thing. It was in the UK. It was Yaawd and Steel Pulse.
Yep.
But Yaawd was a phenomenal group of musicians, and this album would have been a major feature of the tour. He also went on to do another album, a studio album called Social Living, with again another battery of tunes. Of course, what Burning Spear would have been doing too is going back into his vast repertoire by now, and sampling some, past tunes, but also creating new material. Of course, a big part of what was his repertoire was Marcus Garvey. That was essentially the theme of Burning Spear's output, if you will. And you got that in that album, Social Living, Marcus Children. There was another nice, catchy.
Naya Keith.
Naya Keith too, yeah, that
Mr.
too.
Garvey.
And Mr. Garvey. Let's give a listen to some of the pieces from this 1978-79 period.
But
Burning
before we
Spear.
go, Marcus Children, Suffering.
Social Living, released 1978. In fact, that album, Yaawd, provided backing on that album. Solid, and again, it showed growth as far as Burning Spear was concerned. A broader repertoire that looking beyond the Jamaican shores. I mean, civilized reggae basically told the story of reggae music breaking from Jamaica and Britain, which was its two mainstay markets, and then going into Europe, and he highlighted the whole transporting of the music throughout the European continent. Significantly too, we need to appreciate, again, call a spade a spade. These guys epitomized the kind of creativity that was coming out of Jamaica, where again, with the singing about their own domestic experiences, but recognize the ability to, the commonality of their own experience with the experiences of people within the wider diaspora and just across the rest of the world. So the music became not anymore a Jamaican music, but a global music. And people like Burning Spear was the tip of the spearhead, if you will, of that transporting of the music. Granted, not to be outdone, Marley, 1976, is now making his headway, particularly through the North American market, because Marley kind of broke ground in the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. But and laid the foundation, the track on which people like a Burning Spear would want. But one of my favorite tracks. Well, I can't tell you which one, because all of Burning Spear in my book, a classic. But Christopher Columbus, a challenge to the education system, and its miseducation of particularly our Jamaican population, but on a wider scale, the global population. Christopher Columbus was a thief, a liar, right? And you were telling, how can a man discover country where people live and man are raised picnic and all them things? So what? Alas, the people alas? But essentially,
yes,
that's the kind of messaging.
And he didn't do it very nicely either. He said, Christopher Columbus is a damn blasted liar.
Absolutely. and but this is reggae music, and this is when our artists have taken possession of our creativity.
And there was no apology.
And without apology, you speak. Burning Spear would go on in the next couple of years to be rewarded for nearly 30 years of work, when he had two albums back to back, Grammy award winning albums. One was Calling Rastafari, and the other album in 2009, Jah Is Real. And we want to touch on some of the tracks from these two albums. And
before we get into those tracks, Richard, there are two singles that went out in 1990 on the Make We Do It album.
You always want to take with the thing.
Yeah, man. May I take it to a virgin. So let's go.